Well, good morning, everyone. I am now on my last day of riding this wonderful Ducati Monster 821 Stripe. Oh, it is so beautiful. And I thought that after giving it a good 600 miles on the odometer and riding it in just about every sort of road condition environment that you can think of, I thought I'd give you my impressions after that short little bit. I already did my first impressions, and now I think I'd like to leave you with what I think about the bike after I've ridden it for a good amount of time and gotten kind of used to it, or at least the best I can. Okay. Ooh. Well then. This is a great time to do the walk around of this bike, I think. Look at this. San Francisco in the background. This bike is utterly beautiful. Ooh. From all angles. Oh, yeah. If you ever have the opportunity, take it. So, let's start with what I like about this bike. Because, let's be honest, I want this bike. Oh my gosh. It is just exhilarating to ride. There's no other way to put it. The engine that Ducati has put into this bike is spectacular. It has all the torque you could possibly want. It's quite a fast bike. You probably don't need anything faster than this. But after riding on this type of a bike with this style of power band, I love it. I love the engine. I love the engine so very much. It's comfy to ride for long periods of time. It's very maneuverable in the slow spaces you want to do. And it's also really great to be able to ride in the technical twisties. It's really great to be able to ride in the long sweeping corners. It's really great to be able to ride on the freeway, with some caveats. And it's really great to be able to ride in the city China traffic that I ride in, for a variety of reasons. So, you know, you have all those positives, and you're like, well, why don't you just buy it? It's like, well, because there are some negatives, and it would be remiss for me to say that you should buy it without knowing the negatives. Because, you know, maybe if these things matter to you, you might want to look somewhere else. So, let's start with some of the obvious things. The ones that took me most frustrated me was clearly the ergonomics of this bike. And this is something that is not actually a deal breaker. Keep in mind, this is not a deal breaker because all of these things, the ergonomics, can be fixed with the customization that you can do to your own bike. Of course, if you want to have a bike that's just ready out the door, no, probably not. So, here's some of the problems with the ergonomics. So, I am 6'1", 215 pounds plus gear, which is about 20 more pounds on that, and I got size 12 feet. This is all very important because, first, the bike for my weight is far too soft. It would definitely need to have different springs, maybe different valves. maybe not, but overall, very, very good on that front. And, you know, have that all set up because the bike sits really lower than what I'm used to. And because of that, the way that the pegs are situated, my feet get all kind of cramped up and tucked up in there. And this decreases my leverages for using my legs to shift around the bike. It makes me kind of cramped, and it makes it more difficult to, you know, get my, you know, hang off the bike as you would. So that's not great. The second thing with the peg position is the way that they designed the bike itself. On the right side, the exhaust comes out, and it has all of this fancy exhaust cover guard, but you can't get around the fact that the exhaust is in the way. I can't get my balls of my feet on the pegs in the proper position without putting them on at a very steep angle to be able to get over the exhaust guard. And so that kind of causes some problems with my foot positioning, and honestly, like, it just kind of makes the whole thing just a little bit annoying to deal with. You're kind of like, okay, I gotta put extra thought into making sure my feet are in the right position, and it's really hard to be able to relax from that point of view of, you know, just putting my legs in a relaxing position. Meanwhile, upper body wise, fantastic. Hard for me to change anything. Bars are in a great position. You know, I've got really good, you know, leverage on them, and all that's great. So yeah, I guess the last thing is, you know, continuing on with the lower body ergonomics positioning thing. My legs should sit up higher to grip into that little notch of the tank, and in order to do that right now, I have to kind of extend my legs to put them on their tippy toes and kind of get a better grip on the tank. Otherwise, I grab onto the lower part of the tank where you have the little lip, and that kind of is just a little bit annoying. And of course, this whole thing would probably be made better if you had tank grips as well. So, but then again, like I said, all of those things you can fix with additional money. And for what you're getting in terms of this engine and the just how stupidly beautiful this bike is, and the performance you're getting, the fun personality that you get with this Ducati V-Twin, yeah, I would still say it's worth it. It's still worth it. Let's be clear. And you have other little things that are a little bit of a, you know, not great. Like, for instance, this little gear shift. In fact, this whole little cluster right here kind of annoys me. It's not super great. I mean, I know why they did it, and you know, it's got a lot of stuff going for it. You know, it's got the 3 riding modes, but there isn't really a lot of tactile feedback for have I done a thing. So, you know, there's like basically like a little button click. Like, I can't even feel. I kind of just have to like press and make sure that it's on. Whereas on like other bikes, it really has an actual throw, and it's little things like that that kind of like add up and just annoy you. But it's funny because like everything's so like, you just forgive so much about this bike because it's just so much fun and so much adrenaline to ride. Now, getting back to some of the other aspects of this bike that you probably care about. While the engine is spectacular, and I'm not going to argue that, the throttle response is kind of a switch. So at lower RPMs, it doesn't do very well at modulating at all, really. It just doesn't modulate. You're better off just using the clutch with it. And because there's so much torque in the low end, all of this is kind of amplified to the point where it's just jerky. There's no other way to put it. It's just jerky. And so, you know, you have to work with that a little bit more than you would otherwise. Now, that means that kind of at the higher RPMs and working through all that, it's Like, you don't really get that same throttle response. So when you're above, you know, about 6,000 or so, that's kind of where it wants to be, and it does a really good job of when you're shifting in those ranges and when you're throttle adjusting in those ranges. It's real nice. Speaking of the rev range, one other thing I'd kind of like to mention, which is an interesting thing, if you're used to the higher revving bikes. So, you know, usually when you have those higher RPM bikes, you get into the rev range at a very high RPM, and you just keep going. It just feels like if you really wanted to pull in that thing, you could just pull forever. It takes a while to get through the entire RPM range. Now, with this only, I took a look at it, and it looks like it only, the rev limiter is actually at closer to 10,000, or a little bit, yeah, right around 10,000 is when you shift, which, if you're not familiar, that's very low for a sport bike. And the thing about that's built on top of that is because this thing accelerates so hard and violently that you burn through that rev range real fast. I find myself constantly hitting the rev limiter because it's like, oh, you're supposed to like shift again real fast in succession, and you kind of forget to shift because it happens so fast. So there's a lot more shifting that needs to be done on this bike than, say, a triple or an inline 4 that has a much broader rev range, just like in terms of the actual rev range size. So keep that in mind when you're, you know, looking this. It actually, I'm not going to say that it actually makes it worse. I mean, like, I actually like shifting. It's a fun thing to do, and it's really fun to go through the revs and get that sound. Dang it. That's like the 50th time I've tried shifting this second and shifted into neutral. So I'm marking that down as a negative. Why is it so hard to shift into second? God! Every other gear works just fine. But apparently it's too difficult to shift from first into second just right away. It really takes away from that sort of experience. So, transmission-wise, good, but not great, because shifting that second gear from first is just... The sound from these stock pipes, I love it. I love it. I love it. They're so good. It just... Oh... It's a great sound. It's a great sound. Oh. Just listen to it. It's so nice, and it's even better in person, I promise you. It's also not. It's also well tuned in terms of, like, you know, I'd say audio quality and like volume. So, you know, you probably don't have to get anything crazy. I would be totally happy with stock pipes on this because it's just so great. So next, talking about how it rides, the whole package. So, starting off with the different types of environments. I don't know what you're going to get this bike for, but essentially, I haven't found a thing that it doesn't do spectacularly. Well, maybe that's a bit overzealous, but I haven't found anything where this bike can't perform to the best of its abilities. When we're talking about, you know, curvy canyon roads, well, this Ducati is great. And I would go so far into say that as much as I love my triple, and I love my triple, in super tight, very technical roads, ones where you're doing like lots of switchbacks, you're probably staying in first gear or second gear and doing essentially hairpins all the time, very, very curvy roads. This is a better bike. The torque curve lends itself better to going around corners slow and then accelerating quickly from a low RPM out of those corners. So I think I actually have more fun with that than I do on my triple. Alright, and we're here at the intersection. Okay, so, like I said, in those tight technical turns, this is the thing. You want this. You want this thing. You want this thing. Now, the reason why I can't say that in all scenarios I like it better than my triple is because for the longer sweeping turns, the ones where you're getting off the bike and maneuvering around, that ergonomics, once again, is the limiting factor for me. It's just more tiring and more exhaustion to be able to maneuver myself around on that that setup. I'm still certain that it can be fixed, but you know, that means more. You got to spend more money, and you know that can be a factor for some people. So, additionally, highway, because you've got so much torque everywhere, it's just effortless to kind of just maneuver around in, you know, commuting level freeway traffic. It's just great. You have all the power you could possibly want from essentially any RPM in any gear. It's just great. It's just great. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is, so this is a naked bike, which means you're not getting a lot of wind protection at all. Basically, no wind protection at all. And that means that if you're riding a long distance, oh, go this way, then, you know, it's not going to be very comforting for very, very long rides. It's going to wear a bit. And the other thing is that I found at much higher speeds, so if you're going, I don't know, 90 or, you know, cruising at whatever speeds that you probably shouldn't, but you probably will, because who are we kidding? It gets a little bit unstable or frenetic, I would say. The bars, because they're so wide, have a bit of a linear input, so you have to be able to be careful and not really touch them as much as you normally would. You'd have to be kind of light on the bars because it'll, you know, cause your bike to wobble and just feel a little bit less stable. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. So, for commuting to and from on this freeway, oh, wonderful. For touring, you could do it, but I probably wouldn't. Now, the last part about this, you know, commuting in traffic in the city, well, it's just the best. It's just the best. And the power you get from, you know, that once again, that torquey twin really lends itself to the traffic you would see in a normal situation. And if you're in a busy, lane-splitting friendly city, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, any of those, it works all the better. Because even though this bike is pretty heavy, I think it's like 430 or 440 pounds wet, plus you, it doesn't feel super big. It doesn't feel as big as it probably is, which is really impressive. It's probably those really wide handlebars that you see that attribute to that. So, you know, that torque will get you out of tight situations and get you around traffic really well. It's really wonderful to be able to just go through it like that with such confidence. Now, this is definitely marred by the fact that that throttle response at slow speed is not great. Throttle response is not great at slow speeds, so you'd have to put up with that. But you know, if you can do that, it's hard for me to find a fault with it in that sense. And so all those things considered, I want more of this bike. I want this bike. I would love to be able to own this in addition to the Street Triple that I have, because after riding something with a torquey twin like this, it's just, I can totally see the thing. Oh, so one more thing I wanted to mention that is a negative, but it's a negative that's a byproduct of a positive. The engine is very enthusiastic all the time, and it's very Italian, and very loud and shouty, and you know, all of that. It's very raw. It's a raw engine. You get that, and it shows up in all parts of the bikes. And now when I say that, that also means that the vibrations that come from this bike are distracting. Since riding this, and I only rode it for 600 miles or so, I have had 2 screws actually shake loose, and I was able to fix one, but the other, I actually lost a piece of the bike. The frame slider has a little bolt on it that keeps the thing from coming off, and that actually shook loose, and the whole thing came off. I was completely surprised. But considering how I had one of my mirrors also shake loose, and I was able to tighten it down because it's very obvious when a mirror is loose, indicates to me that, like, this thing shakes pretty intensely. And to add to that effect, you gotta change these mirrors. They're not a bad position. In fact, they give me pretty good visibility. But unfortunately, above 6,000 RPMs, they vibrate so violently that everything is just a fuzzy blur because they're just vibrating so hard. And you can't really ride around effectively when you can't see in your mirrors, or at least I can't. So if you could find a better way to do that, that would be great. And of course, if you got to imagine, if the bars are shaking so much, and then that's also going to get translated to your hands a little bit. Now, if you are lightly caressing your bars like you should, and not giving them a death grip, it hopefully won't affect you as much. But I know that if I were to grip these bars hard for a long period of time, they would probably wear on my hands quite a bit, and I'd probably get hand fatigue pretty easily. The same thing happens when you ride a go-kart at the track. You tend to grip the hands so hard, and then your hands get numb. So that's not great. And of course, I'm making the comparison to my Street Triple, but that's a bad comparison because the smoothness of that is legendary. And I won't get into that now, but essentially, on its own merits, this bike overall is a wonderful machine. Just wonderful. And the bad things I have to say about it are kind of byproducts of its positives, or they're things that you can fix. And you know, maybe you should say, well, I shouldn't have to fix the things, but you know, you're gonna customize your bike anyways, so you might as well go into it knowing that. And you know, this is probably a direct competitor to the Street Triple FZ09 in terms of horsepower and torque and looks department. So yeah, if you're looking at those two bikes, give this a look too. It'll probably surprise you with the way that its power is delivered, the way it feels, the way it handles, and you know, generally how it is. Things I can't comment on. I have no idea about Ducati reliability. I just have no idea. I also don't really know what it takes to maintain this, or the cost to maintain this as well. So you should do the research that you have on your own for that, because owning a bike is more than just how it rides. It's being able to ride whenever you want, and you can't necessarily do that if you know, it's sitting in a garage on a paddock stand. So yeah, that's really all I have for that. I'm going to continue riding this thing until I have to give it back, because it's just wonderful. And I encourage you guys to take some time and ride this thing too. I don't know how I've never actually been here before. This is amazing.